I want to start today with a phrase that honestly sounds like it was ripped right out of a comic book origin story.
I know the one.
Yeah, or maybe some high fantasy novel. Listen to this description. Turns sorrow and anger into a shield of justice for the vulnerable.
It really does sound cinematic, you know. It conjures up these images of someone standing completely alone on a battlefield, just holding the line while everyone else retreats.
Right. But we aren't talking about a fictional superhero or a movie character today. We are talking about, well, your coworker in HR.
Exactly.
We're talking about that quiet friend of yours who suddenly gets terrifyingly serious when they see someone getting bullied. We are diving back into the max energy ME80 personality system, and the profile on the table today is the FSN. They call this type the Justice Guardian.
The Justice Guardian. It's a title that carries a massive amount of weight, and honestly, it kind of needs to. Because when we look at the FSAN, we are looking at a personality type that is doing a huge amount of heavy lifting for the rest of society.
Usually without anyone noticing.
Right until something goes completely wrong.
Well, that's the mission for this deep dive. We are going to look under the hood of the FSAN, how they tick, why they are wired to protect, and frankly, why they are so prone to burning out if they aren't careful. But before we get into the gears and wires of this specific person, let's zoom out for a quick second. For the listener who maybe missed our previous dives, give us the pitch on the Max Energy ME80 system. What makes this different from, say, your standard personality tests?
Sure. So, most personality tests out there describe behavior. They tell you what you do, like you talk a lot or you like spreadsheets. The Max Energy ME80 system is fundamentally different because it's about energy mechanics.
The underlying engine.
Exactly. It maps out your energy matrix. It looks at where your internal energy originates, how it activates emotionally, how you actually calculate your decisions, and finally, how all of that manifests in the real world.
So it's basically the difference between describing the paint color of a car versus handing someone a blueprint of the engine.
That's a great way to put it. It explains the flow of your internal power. And understanding that flow is absolutely crucial for the FSAN because, well, on the surface, they can seem incredibly contradictory.
How so?
Well, they can be incredibly gentle, yet completely unyielding, compassionate, yet cold. To understand why they operate like that, you have to track the energy through that matrix.
Okay, let's get into the identity of this specific type then, because you mentioned earlier that there's a huge misconception about the FSN. People see them as just like worker bees or endurance types because they keep their heads down.
That is a massive misconception.
Yeah.
And it completely misses the soul of this profile. If you are managing an FS and you think their value is just grinding out work, you are misusing them.
They aren't just an execution machine.
No, the Justice Guardian is not defined by how much work they can process. They're defined by their moral compass. The source material is very specific here. Their core identity is that of a justice practitioner.
A justice practitioner. That sounds so official, like they need a badge.
In their minds, they sort of have one. Their starting point, their ignition key, if you will, is compassionate emotion. But their destination is principled guardianship.
Okay, break that down for me.
See, for an SAN, stability isn't just about keeping things quiet or efficient. It's not about maintaining the status quo just so everyone is comfortable. For them, stability is about ensuring that fundamental bottom lines are not easily crossed.
So if I'm an FSAN, I'm not working hard just to get a quarterly bonus. I'm working hard because if I don't, something unfair might happen.
Precisely. Their action isn't about speed at all. It's about preventing injustice from happening quietly. They are the ones in a meeting who say, no, we cannot just skip the safety check. Or, no, we can't treat this employee that way just to save a few bucks. They are the breakwater that stops the waves from eroding the shore.
I love that image, the breakwater. It takes a beating so the shore doesn't have to. But that brings us to their mechanism of control. The source talks about a global view and a shield. How do they actually build this defense?
It all stems from that core driver we just mentioned, which is compassion. And this is the part that confuses people. It doesn't stay as soft, fuzzy feelings.
Right.
In the FSAN's internal structure, that compassion hardens into a very stable guardian structure of principles. They build a literal fortress around what they care about.
So they take the squishy feelings, the sorrow for someone's pain, or the anger at a system being unfair, and they transmute that into rules.
Into protection, into a shield. They don't just feel bad for the vulnerable. They physically or systemically place themselves right between the vulnerable and the threat. It's a complete transformation of energy, I feel your pain becomes, I will ensure this pain stops.
That is intense, and it totally explains why they can seem so serious. They aren't just filing paperwork. In their heads, they are guarding the castle.
Okay, I want to get technical for a minute. You mentioned the energy matrix earlier, the
Mhm.
IP, IQ, EQ layers. Let's walk through the FSAN's matrix specifically. What is happening inside them to create this shield? Let's do it. Think of this as the operating system of the Justice Guardian. We start at the very bottom, the deepest layer, the IP, or inner value layer.
The source defines this as energy drive activation.
Correct. This is the spark plug. For the FSAN, the engine turns on when their values are triggered. It's an internal drive to validate what is right. They don't need a boss to tell them to care. The energy is self-generating, based on their internal moral code.
So if they see something wrong, it just fires up automatically?
Yes. If they see a violation of values, the engine roars to life. It is an instinctual need to verify, is this right? Is this just?
Okay, so the engine is running. The next layer up is the IQ layer, the emotional activation layer.
This one is defined as experience and verification judgment. Think of this as their sensor array. The FSAN is constantly scanning their environment. They're feeling the emotional temperature of the room.
Like reading the room, but on a deeper level.
Exactly. They are verifying, is everyone okay? Is this fair? Is someone being left out here? This layer is highly sensitive and very porous. They basically absorb the room.
So they are taking in all this raw emotional data. But here's where it gets really interesting to me, and I think this is the plot twist of the SSN. The next layer up is EQ, the decision calculation layer. And the definition here is emotional detachment.
You spotted the paradox. This is the absolute secret sauce of the Justice Guardian.
Explain that to me, because how can you be driven by compassion, that hot IP and IQ energy we just talked about, but then your decision layer is detached and cold? That feels like a total contradiction.
It definitely feels like one, but it's actually a necessity. Because true justice requires impartiality. If they're purely emotional all the way up the stack, they would just be reactive.
They'd just be a mess.
Right, they'd be crying with the victim but completely unable to solve the problem. The FSAN takes that compassionate data from the IQ layer, the knowledge that this person is hurting, moves it up to the EQ layer, and cools it down.
So it's a cooling system, like a radiator for feelings.
A radiator is a perfect way to look at it.
Yeah.
They detach so they can understand the mechanics of the problem and formulate a plan that actually works. They ask, what is the rule here? What is the precedent? How do I fix this systemically? They aren't ignoring the emotion at all. They are processing it into a practical solution.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. That's why they make such good judges or compliance officers. They care enough to act, but they are cool enough to act correctly.
Right. If you have a crisis, you want an FSAN. They won't panic. They will absolutely feel the weight of the crisis, but their decision-making modules step in and say, okay, here is the procedure, let's execute.
That leads right to the final layer, the manifestation layer.
Energy released outward. This is the impact. Because of that cooling process in the EQ layer, the output isn't some chaotic explosion of feeling. It's a targeted structural action to fix the imbalance.
It's grounded.
It's steady. It's reliable. It is the shield finally being planted in the ground.
So we've got this machine that sucks in emotional data, cools it into logic, and churns out justice. Let's dig deeper into the inner traits. The source mentions compassion as origin. We've touched on this, but how does it actually show up in day-to-day life? Because I'm guessing they aren't walking around wearing capes.
No capes, usually cardigans or very sensible blazers, but it shows up as a justice radar. The FSAN has an incredibly high moral perception ability. They are sensitive to three specific things: injustice, imbalance, and overlooked suffering.
Overlooked suffering. That's such a powerful phrase. It implies seeing things that everyone else just completely misses.
It does. They're the ones who see the person sitting alone in the cafeteria. They notice the quiet team member who is doing all the heavy lifting but getting none of the credit. While everyone else is focused on the star performer, the FSAN is watching the margins.
And here's the shift the source describes. When they see these boundaries being crossed, they transform. They might be a gentle, quiet colleague 1 minute, but once that radar pings,
They become resolute. The source says they stand up with calm and unyielding determination.
unyielding is the key word there, I think.
It absolutely is. It's not a tantrum. They usually won't even raise their voice.
Yeah.
It's just a wall. You cannot move them once they have decided that a principle is being violated.
It's just locked in.
Yeah, it's not emotionalism anymore. It's moral clarity. You can argue with an opinion, but you really can't argue with a force of nature.
And there's always a big But in these deep dives, being a human shield sounds totally exhausting. Being a load-bearing wall for everyone else's problems has to take a massive toll. This brings us to the shadow blind spot. Every superhero has a kryptonite. What takes down the Justice Guardian?
The source defines the shadow perfectly. It's self-depletion from prolonged bearing.
Prolonged bearing, just carrying the weight for too long.
Exactly. The trap is that the FSAN habitually views themselves as the absolute last line of defense. They have this internal monologue that says, if I don't stop this bad thing from happening, nobody else will.
Which, might be true sometimes, but definitely not all the time.
Right. But because they believe it, they extend their responsibility infinitely. They take on their family's problems, their company's ethical issues, their friends' drama. But unlike some other types who might vent or complain to release that pressure, the FSAN turns all their emotions inward.
So they are fixing everyone else's mess, but nobody is checking on them.
And they won't let anyone check on them. That's the real kicker. They are the strong one, that righteous anger that motivates them initially. If it isn't released or resolved, it just transforms into exhaustion. The source calls it emotional cooling. They burn out. They get deeply cynical.
That is a serious danger zone. It's like you're guarding the castle, but you're starving to death inside the gate.
That is a perfect analogy. You just become brittle. And when an FSAN burns out, they don't usually explode. They implode. They become numb. And for a personality type that is entirely fueled by compassion, becoming numb is essentially losing their superpower.
For any SN listening right now, I really hope you're hearing this. This is the critical takeaway for you. You cannot guard the world if you have collapsed.
You absolutely have to resource the Guardian.
Let's pivot slightly to how this plays out with other people. Social relationships. If I'm friends with an FSAN or maybe dating one, what's the vibe there?
On the surface, they are the rock. The source describes them as steady, upright, reasonable, and highly trustworthy. They are the exact person you call at 3 in the morning when you're in trouble because you know they won't panic and they won't judge you. Well, at least not initially.
I hear a very big but coming.
But there is a hidden barrier. The dynamic is reliable, but low to lean on. They have a very, very high trust threshold. They are listening to your problems, helping you fix your entire life, but they rarely show their own vulnerability.
So it's a bit of a one-way street. Not out of selfishness, obviously, but out of protection.
Out of a deep sense of responsibility, they don't want to burden you. They feel like they should be able to handle it completely by themselves. But there is also a very stark warning in the source here about something called the door slam.
Oh, I read this part. It's kind of terrifying. It's like the FSAN Ice Age.
It really is. Because the FSAN values moral integrity so highly. If they judge someone as unworthy, meaning if you violate their core principles or betray their trust deeply, they don't usually fight. They don't scream. They just withdraw.
The source says the relationship becomes polite but no longer open.
That is the coldest place to possibly be with an FSA.
Whoa.
They will still say good morning. They will still be perfectly professional, but the bridge is gone. You are on the other side of the moat and the drawbridge has been pulled up permanently.
It's almost worse than a fight. A fight implies I still care enough about you to argue. This is just deletion.
Correct. It's a structural protective measure. If you are a threat to their peace or their values, you are removed from the inner circle. Note to self, for everyone listening right now, do not cross an FSAN's moral bottom line. You really won't get a second chance.
Okay, duly noted. Keep the trust. Let's talk business value now. We've established they are reliable and unyielding. How does this translate to value in a modern organization? Because honestly, sometimes corporate culture is all about move fast, break things. That does not sound like the FSAN vibe at all.
It's the exact opposite, and that's exactly why they are vital. They are the justice stabilizer. In a corporate world obsessed with speed, the FSAN is the one ensuring that what you're breaking isn't the company's future, its legality, or its reputation.
The source really emphasizes that their value is not speed or output volume, which I think is so important for managers to hear. If you judge an FSAN by how many widgets they crank out in an hour, you're measuring the wrong thing entirely.
Completely.
Yeah.
You are essentially measuring a security system by how loud it plays music. It's just the wrong metric. Their real value is ensuring that as the organization moves forward, no one gets trampled, and trust is not destroyed. They protect the integrity of the whole system. They are the ones who read the fine print in the contract. They are the ones who actually think about the long-term consequences of a really quick decision.
So if the visionary CEO is the gas pedal, the FSAN is the brakes and the steering wheel.
And the seatbelts. You need them to survive the crash.
So where do they shine best? What are the optimal habitats for a justice guardian? The source lists a few recommended fields. Let's go through them.
The first one is pretty obvious. Institutional and regulatory guardianship. We're talking compliance, audit, ethics committees, anywhere where there's a firm rule book that needs to be respected. They love a good rule book as long as the rules are fair.
That makes total sense. They are the natural immune system of an organization.
Exactly. The second area is legal, rights, and coordination. Think legal affairs, mediation, advisory roles. Remember that EQ layer we talked about? Their unique ability to be compassionate yet emotionally detached makes them excellent at navigating really tense conflicts without losing their heads. They can sit in a room with two furious parties and actually find the fair path forward.
And I see organizational culture and HR on the list too, but probably not the fun police kind of HR.
No, the values implementation kind. And FSAN and HR isn't just mindlessly processing payroll. They are actively fighting to make sure the company culture is genuinely fair. They are the ones pushing for pay equity. They are building long-term trust among employees. If you have an FSAN and HR, your employees probably feel a lot safer.
And finally, social and service roles.
Right. Education, public service, NGOs, anywhere where the core mission is to protect the vulnerable or uphold a standard for the public good. If the job description is basically help of those who can't help themselves, the FSAN is usually first in line.
It really is a vital role. As we're talking through all this, I'm realizing just how much society relies on these people to keep the wheels from falling off. They are the glue.
We do rely on them heavily. But I want to circle back to you, the listener, specifically if you are an FSAN, because this deep dive isn't just about praising you. It's a real call to action for your own health.
Let's hit that conclusion. The source had a very specific path to growth, a final takeaway. What is the golden sentence here?
It's this. When justice guardians learn to set protective boundaries for themselves, letting compassion no longer only flow outward, that persistence transforms from heavy responsibility into stable and enduring honor.
That is really beautiful. Letting compassion no longer only flow outward. That's the hard part for them, isn't it?
It is the absolute hardest part. You have to turn that shield around sometimes and protect yourself. You have to treat your own energy reserves with the exact same respect you treat the rules and rights of others. You're also a vulnerable person who deserves protection.
Because if the guardian falls, there's literally no one left to guard the gate.
Exactly. Your sustainability is a mandatory part of your duty.
This has been such an eye-opening look at the FS. I feel like I understand my strict friends a lot better now. It's not about being rigid at all. It's about being safe.
It's always about looking deeper than the behavior to find the intent. And with the FSN, the intent is almost always noble. They just want the world to be fair. And that's a truly beautiful thing.
Well, we are just scratching the surface of what the Max Energy system can offer. This deep dive was based on the Math Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report.
Yes, and if this resonated with you today, maybe you recognized yourself or a partner or that quiet colleague in accounting, there is so much more to explore in the full system. Every single profile has this level of incredible depth.
Absolutely. If you want to dig in, you can visit their official website at www.maxenergylife.com. Or if you're on social media, you can search for Max Energy, followed by the Chinese characters for Poly Energy Personality Studies. That's Max Energy ESA. Or you can search for Match Energy on Facebook.
It is definitely worth a look. Understanding your energy matrix really is the first step to mastering it.
So, to all the Justice Guardians out there listening, thank you for holding the line. Thank you for reading the fine print for the rest of us. But do us a huge favor, take a break today, put the shield down for just a minute, and recharge. The world will still be here when you get back.
You've definitely earned it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.